And it's on. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's the Konflux community call, March 19th. We have 2 points on the agenda today. Maybe more will be added. Adela talking about Mintmaker demo and feature, and Adam with a topic on CI builds. Adela, take it away.
So hello, everyone. My name is Adela. I'm working on Mintmaker, or the dependency management tool in Konflux. I will share my screen. Okay. Great. Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So this week I sent also the announcement, which some of you may have read. It's about I have been working on integrating Mintmaker with the issue dashboard in the Konflux UI, so that all of you can see the Mintmaker issues, or like the most common issues that you may be dealing with when Mintmaker isn't working. It's all in the announcement if you want to look through it. There's a bit of a background, how it works. I will not go into that. I just wanted to show you the issues a bit more. So this is from my namespace, and I will show you what the issues look like. So here in the issue name, you can see that it's scoped by the repository and the branch. Then you have the type, what it is. This is a warning, for example, when it was created, and then you have the description here. So one of the issues that we have been getting questions about quite frequently in the user support was caused by Mintmaker hitting the PR limit. So here you can see when your repository hits the limit, and you can delete the PRs and Mintmaker will work again. Here I have some error because there is Mintmaker is updating your log files, and sometimes to hit an error, it can be due to a missing file or anything else. So here you can see the error. As you know, those errors can be quite long. It can be like 50 lines or more, and it's sometimes difficult to navigate. So I also integrated a function which will shorten those messages. Here you can see that 13 lines were just deleted because it's usually repeating information. So the function just picks the most important information and keeps it here. Like here it says like file not found. So you know what's the problem and you can fix it yourself. So I guess that will be all that I wanted to really show you about this this feature for us. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. Yes.
Is it possible to look at full logs?
Not right now. We are working on integrating the full logs into the UI, but this for now is just this short overview. Yes, Mario.
Sure. So, by the way, Mikola, I am one of the persons that is working on making the logs available. We plan to have it probably by the end of Q2, but let's see how things go. But yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Thank you.
Yes, Ralph.
Can I ask, I guess, a little bit about how it works? I see there's that log analyzer code base, and so does that run as part of the Mintmaker job in the Mintmaker namespace, or is it like a separate job that periodically scans the logs that are kind of separate from it?
So it's in the namespace. Mintmaker spins up a pipeline. One of those steps is the renovate step, and then right after, the log analyzer runs, and it scans the logs from the renovate run it just did. So it's in one pipeline.
I see. Cool. So is the log analyzer like in a finally block so that it always runs even if the renovate job totally fails?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And then it makes API calls to the issue dashboard to kite. That's what it's called, the backend for the issues dashboard.
Yes, exactly. It sends. They have this like pipeline webhook. We also send issues to this. I believe it's here. No, so it's here. You can see also just that the pipeline run failed. with this like repository. That's the Mintmaker one. And if you click on more, here you can see that Mintmaker finished with an error. So that's for the pipeline fail. And then I implemented a custom webhook, which is this Mintmaker error. And there you have like more information about the specific error type, what it was.
Interesting. Oh, so this is interesting. So it's maybe related incidentally to Mikola's question about the logs being available. But if you go back to the dashboard, Adela, and you see the scope column, the Mintmaker error, like if I'm a user and I don't know how any of this works, Mintmaker error makes sense. Like, oh, I know what Mintmaker is anyway. But pipeline run, I would assume as a user that that's an error in my build pipeline runs or something like that. But the pipeline run error there is an error in the Mintmaker pipeline run?
Yeah, this one, yes. It's a generic about, I believe, or so I don't know much about this because this is more a question to Kite. But from what, like my understanding is that any pipeline, if it fails, it goes into this like webhook. So it can be built pipeline, but that is not integrated yet, as far as I know, with Kite. But for us, it's our like Mintmaker pipeline.
Cool. That makes sense. Yeah, as a user, if the pipeline runs could somehow be scoped to Mintmaker, build, test, and release, then it would help the user kind of more quickly see what they need to do. Anyway, this is cool. It's great to see now more than one issue type in the issues dashboard. It starts to come alive this way, which is awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, then we'll stop sharing and you can go on.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you so much for working on it, Adela. It's an awesome addition.
Of course.
All right, our next point on the agenda, going back to the doc, is Adam. Adam Kaplan, you're up for CI validation for build and release pipelines.
Yeah, so this came out of, I think, an incident that happened with a few of the Konflux instances where, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, it basically amounted to one of the release pipelines doing something it wasn't supposed to do. And it got me kind of wondering that there might be a general problem that we need to solve within the Konflux community around how we do validation around our build pipelines or really any pipeline that we're maintaining, whether that's a build pipeline or release pipeline. One of the things that's kind of top of mind for me is the fact that almost all of these pipelines that we're authoring have side effects with external services. And to test and validate that those things are working well is just like a generally hard CI problem. So this is more like a open discussion, and I don't think there's going to be any solution out of this call about like how can we improve or the quality of the pipeline definitions that we have, and we're kind of like giving our stamp of approval on within the project.
I see Mikola's hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, just answering Adam's question that for build pipeline, we have set of end-to-end tests. So in every update to pipeline tasks, we run that set of tests and that currently validate the pipeline. Yeah, we might have some gaps, but we are trying to cover all the basic use cases, at least the most common use cases that we have. But yeah, if you have any good ideas how to improve, we are glad to do it.
Can I ask, Adam, your comment about side effects is like a concrete one. And when I think about the if I think about the release pipelines, I see the correctness of that like right away. Like there's tons of side effects. Like their job is to take content and put it other places outside of Konflux to distribute it. And so kind of like by nature, side effects are the name of the game for release pipelines. Is the same also true for build pipelines? It doesn't make the statement wrong. It just like focuses it. Like build pipelines, build content, they might call an external service like SNCC to ask for a SAST scan on something, but then do they have other side effects other than pushing content into Quay?
I think certainly for right now, and especially with the generic build pipeline ADR that just merged, so far it's just scoped to play the container registry, which, I mean, you can argue that's still kind of a side effect. However, the way that we're doing things right now, or certainly if you've got like, you know, image controller and other things set up, you're pushing that to like it's a sandbox environment, right? You know, that's kind of like your dev playground per se, and that it's not a bad thing necessarily if like bad information gets put there. Whereas it, you know, for a release pipeline, you don't want to publish something for the sake of testing something to a prod environment. It's something where, you know, you probably need stand-ins or staging kind of environments where to test and validate these things, there's a stand-in for those destinations.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a much harder challenge for release pipeline than build pipeline.
Mikla?
Yeah, it might, I don't know if it's useful, but one of the tactics that we use for our services, we do some checks even in production environment. So basically it's mostly health checks like for operators, but the same could be used for release pipeline. So we could have some dedicated location into which we try to push something on prod. So it shouldn't touch any user because it's like private for us only, but could show us the pipeline health.
I guess maybe it's an audience question, but like, do we have anybody on the call today who works on the release pipelines and knows about the release pipeline like test mechanisms?
I'm on the call today. I mean, I'm not fully following like pushing to prod. I mean, like we're not gonna push like production advisories and stuff like that. Like that doesn't really make sense to me. Like we do as much as we can stage, which is a lot of things. There are things where we interact with the production version versus the stage version because the stage version is not reliable enough for tests. But I'm not fully following the let's push to prod for test idea. Because by nature, like these pipelines give stuff to the users. So like to say, we'll push to prod, but it's not going to go to the users. Like that's exactly what the pipeline does, is give stuff to the users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the fundamental problem that Adam is pointing out, that it's like the side effects are hard. Like mocking, we need to do mocks for like small, simple tests, but they're not sufficient for the end. And then any environment other than the prod environment has like drawbacks, you know, that limit the effectiveness of the testing.
Yeah, one other thing I'll mention is currently our end-to-end test will start with a build, and then you know the integration service creates the release, and the release is what like we're really trying to test. And we've gotten the feedback multiple times. We test in stage at the stage cluster, and there's an update going on the stage cluster or something, so our builds aren't working, and we reach out to the infra team and ask for help. And they say, why are you using the stage cluster to test? And why are you running builds as part of your test? You shouldn't be testing the build pipeline as part of your release pipeline. And now in this call, it's like, you should be testing the build to make sure the release pipeline still works. So like it's complete opposites. And we've been told, I guess, not both. So
yeah. This maybe just reinforces Adam's point of like, we need to talk and think about the strategy so everybody's not giving each other conflicting answers.
yeah, agreed.
It's like related to this point, but like when a bunch of us were, well, not a bunch of us, I wasn't a part of it. Some people were working on the operator to go from using the Helm chart installation of Konflux CI into an operator-based one. And we were thinking about upgrade paths for users, because when you have an OLM operator, there's this upgrade path, and a user could stay on, say, an old version of Konflux if they were running their own instance, and then later to choose to upgrade to newer versions in like a controlled way. And the OLM operator framework is good at doing that because you can pin the digests of all the controllers to specific versions. But both our build pipelines and our release pipelines aren't like under the control of the operator. So we were like brainstorming for a while. We didn't come to a conclusion on it of what would it look like for a user to upgrade their operator to a certain version, and only then for tenants in their instance are the versions of release pipelines associated with that version of Konflux available to them to use. And like our model just doesn't work that way today. There's users who run release pipelines, depending on how their releases are configured, use branches directly from GitHub that are controlled and managed by the release service maintainers or release pipeline maintainers. But it's not the same as being tied to the operator, right? Like that's a problem to solve, but it like opens up a question of like, if we wanted to validate a version of Konflux CI, like a specific set of digests of all the contributing pieces, currently that's really just the controllers, but the build pipelines and release pipelines are like independent. And if we could somehow like map them into that system and control the way they'd be upgraded for a user, then we could start to think about that being like the place where we run tests. The problem of how you run the tests and deal with the side effects of the environment still stands, but it like, I don't know, just like kind of moves the problem to a new place. Johnny?
Yeah, I was going to add that we had a meeting literally yesterday about this exact idea of like adding to infra deployments, what revision or branch we get of the release pipelines, which could be nice. Of course, there is the issue of like, if it's a bug in production and you want it fixed right now, that makes it a lot harder. But they're ongoing. Yesterday it was David, myself, Danny, Fabius talking about this. So we ended the call saying we don't know how to solve this right now, but the discussions are ongoing.
Yeah, I was talking about it with Gal, I think, and Andrew in a Slack thread a month or something ago. Similarly, we got to like, we don't know how to solve this, but it seems like a good problem to solve.
Yeah, +1.
Mm-hmm. Kuno, go ahead.
So I think it basically does boil down to the difficulty in testing Tekton pipelines in general. And I think that in some recent talks, we were hoping that the new pipelines and pipelines feature could help us. We were talking about it in context of integration pipelines, where you will run an integration pipeline and then test one of your pipelines. These were also integration pipelines in that context. But I'm thinking if this could apply to this discussion too.
I guess, forgive me, but like pipelines and pipelines, without pipelines and pipelines, you can run a pipeline that's meant to test other pipelines. And as one of the tasks in that pipeline, if you have access to the Kubernetes API, you can just launch another pipeline and then monitor it without like special support from Tekton. Is that like an especially burdensome problem, or?
That's a good point, but I think there's a more direct connection where you can then verify the results of the pipeline and see what it actually did directly from that pipeline, which makes it a bit easier when you run the pipeline. But I agree, yeah, there are definitely there have been historically workarounds for this already.
Yeah. It's maybe just worth pointing out, maybe people don't know that we have multiple ways like around the project of testing pipelines and tasks. And one of them was pioneered by the release service team, which is that kind-based testing. They're not quite unit tests, but they're definitely not E2E tests, because they have this mocking functionality to set up a kind cluster for a run, and then they can test tasks with multiple tests that are defined for those tasks themselves as Tekton pipelines. They don't run into the problem that you're describing, Kruno, because there's not like an orchestrating pipeline of the test, but they do just launch Tekton pipelines that themselves are tests and then are monitoring for the success of those. But that's like totally separate from our E2E test framework that uses other techniques. And I don't know, Kruno, like in the case you were just describing of like tests for integration tests, is that part of the E2E test repo? Does it use the kind framework that release service catalog started and we copied to build definitions? Or does it use a third and different way of orchestrating those tests?
So basically I think that the kind approach of testing tasks was the inspiration. But it would be also possible to run it in your cluster, but of course setting guardrails that the pipeline that you're testing is actually doing mock things instead of actually pushing stuff to places.
Cool.
Which kind of I think that's also boiled down to the other issue here. How do you test things that are supposed to do stuff in production?
Yeah.
And how do you mock things, everything around it?
There's like maybe the difficulty of it depends on the nature of the external system. That like if the external system is Quay is nicely namespaced and has a tenant framework that makes sense. And so you can run a test that just targets a different tenant and you're all good. You don't have to, we never have to test against stage Quay. Like it's not a thing we've ever had to consider. But if the external system is not set up in a way that supports that kind of easy switching of context or namespacing of context, then we have to be extra careful about what we do or invent different ways of doing things.
The one thing that I've sometimes seen is frameworks where you can basically almost like record the responses that are coming from a service and then use those effective recordings as like a playback in a test so that you can kind of mock out that behavior. I don't know if that's it's something where as a kind of pipeline maintainer, I could see that getting to be a boil the ocean problem because there'll just be so many different services that you'll interact with, and to be able to isolate each one and have like playbacks for each one, I feel like that could get daunting.
Those systems often help tests run faster. Like they make a thing that would be an integration test into more of a, not a unit test, but like things can run locally then and then therefore faster. But if it was hard to figure out how to write a test that would touch a real production like endpoint or like a sensitive endpoint in the first place, then it would be just as hard to like to get that recording.
It's almost like you would have to have effectively run the sort of production pipeline with a sort of setting configured so that it is doing that kind of recording.
That's interesting.
The system recording, so you have that sort of prod data playback, which that too then introduces problems like you don't want sensitive data then being in like a public Git that you're using for testing and validation.
Yeah. Johnny, go ahead.
I guess like one other thing, again, not a solution, but just it's more explaining the problem. Like we've had instances where owners of services tell us like, stop using this in the test because we can only handle so much load. And like I've responded, we need to be able to test this. Like, instead of just like, they said, oh, like make sure you give the right inputs and that's your test. And I'm like, we have to be able to actually test this because if the user doesn't fail till they hit production, they're going to be really mad. That's not going to work. It's happened before and they don't like that at all. So that's definitely an issue that we've had come up. And as far as like testing all the different variants and everything, the pipelines, I think the build team is also doing this, but we have one of our many features is to move our stuff from inline scripts to standalone scripts and then convert them to Python so we can use all the Python unit tests and everything to make that a lot better. It's not done yet. It's in progress, but
yeah, it doesn't solve the integration test problem and the E2E test problem, but it's a good move.
Yeah.
Gal just joined to catch up. Gal, we're talking about E2E test strategies for pipelines in general, but specifically the release pipelines that have to deal with sensitive like downstream systems that like the whole point of the pipeline is to produce side effects in those systems, but it's difficult to test that. So maybe we've reached the end of the conversation for now. Adam, what would you like to do with this?
So I think if there's like the one sort of like positive, it would be around the move from away from bash and to having code. That feels like at least the better way to start. Maybe it becomes the kind of we standardize that as a practice within the Konflux community, that if you're authoring tasks, authoring pipelines, you are minimizing bash, and that you kind of default to code, whether that is Python or Go or whatever kind of programming language you have. Just having something where it's a real programming language that you can write unit tests for. I think that's probably that feels more tangible than the sort of broader dealing with external systems that we're stretching to limits.
Gal, go ahead.
I'll add to this also, like, not writing inline scripts, even if it's in Python. Okay, but I would like to see a task that has a single command where it calls another tool inside of an image, and that's it. Not huge inline scripts. Beside of everything that was discussed about the fact that it is not testable at all when you inline the scripts like that, and it's difficult for linters and for AI to modify those. Also, it may not sound a lot, but when you have thousands of tasks like that in the cluster, they take a lot of space in etcd, because all of those scripts are stored in etcd.
And they're stored 3 times, right? They're in the pipeline run, and they're twice in the pipeline run. Is this true? They're in the spec and in the status?
I don't know if they are in the pipeline run, but for sure in the I think in the task run and in the pod.
And in the
So
pod, yeah.
At least twice. And in etcd, every time there is a modification, it creates a new version for the resource. And every few minutes, it does compaction and removes older versions. So when you have so many controllers that touch everything, like all of those resources, pods and tests and task runs, so this is one of the reasons why we impact etcd so much.
I would say I would support an ADR if someone were to propose it that discusses what Adam just proposed, what Gal just supported, that we've said before, and I feel like is already like a de facto decision. Like we're already moving that direction. But getting it recorded as when you make a Tecton task, it should be a single command that's called from some code in an image, and that image should have its normal software development test practices around it, unit tests and so on. Is the pattern, this is a question actually, is the pattern, so we have another ADR out there that's about a common task runner image to reduce the number of images that we're asking the cluster to pull. So is our expected flow that, like, let's pick some build service task that it'll have its own repo for its code with tests. Will that be built into an image of its own that then gets kind of pulled as a multi-stage image into our common task runner image? Or is the common task runner image meant to like perform the builds of all of those pieces of software? Like we have over 100 tasks with like some specific code. Is there a cascading version of the binary builds of that, or is it a one shot in the common task runner image? I guess it could be answered just by looking at the container file of the common task runner image. No, I'll go look after the meeting, pick it up. Thank you. Adam.
I was just for myself looking into writing a task runner for Maven and Java build. So something for that, a common image for everything wouldn't necessarily work, because we one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to be providing different flavors of the same image that are based on the version of OpenJDK that's needed. So there's multiple different versions. You get different behavior based on which version you are using. I think we too also may need to provide, since for things that are being based off of UBI, different flavors of UBI as well. And so it's something that, for what I'm currently investigating right now, I already know that I'm going to need multiple variants of these sort of base builder images for the tasks.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. In our current, for container build pipelines anyways, we can have a common step image for the build a task, even if the base image used by the container builds is different, is supplied by the user. But in your case, your image is the step image for the task. True?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll need to go back and modify that ADR then to revise it and say these situations are exceptional. On the full send initiative, I'm using that ADR as kind of a test case for figuring out if we can create an agent that can look for discrepancies between the ADRs and the actual code to see if they can propose alignments of the code to the ADR. And so they would try to like undo work on your side, unless it's like reflected in the ADRs. This is an exception to this rule that we've set for ourselves. Dale, I see your hand.
Yes, you mentioned steps, and there are cases that they can be useful, but I would say that try to everyone, do your best to avoid having tasks with multiple steps. And why am I saying this? Because in Tekton, all the images, all the containers are started at the same time. So if you have 2 steps, each one of them request 1 gigs of RAM, your pod is going to request 2 gigs of RAM. Okay, even though one step is not doing anything. This is how it works. This is how we ended up with a build task that requests 20 gigs of RAM without any and not to speak about the limits. So those steps are really a waste of resources. And if you can consolidate and just have like fewer or just one, do it. It will make us, it will help us to utilize the resources that we have much better. Yes, and as a side note, if we already speak about tasks and images, one thing that we noticed in Kubernetes, there is, I think it's something pretty new, where you can specify a tag and a digest in the same image reference. The algorithm in the kubelet is pretty simple. If it sees the latest tag, it doesn't care if there is a digest, and it will always pull the image. And we saw that we have a lot of images that use this pattern, and it means that we are using 0 node cache. This is why a lot of users complain about issues where images are not getting pulled properly, because we are pulling a lot. Like so the probability that we will hit an issue is much greater. So if you are using such reference where you have the latest tag in a digest, just make sure to specify the pull policy to if not present. It's again, when you have thousands of pods running in the cluster, more than thousands, I think it's like a lot, running in your cluster every day, it really has a huge impact on the user experience.
I was going to add that this sounds like a contribution opportunity for the Tekton at large, having this kind of linter. So if you have a pipeline or task definition, particularly for the task definition, things like a check on an estimated number of compute resources that you're requesting. And if that's exceeding, 8 gigabytes, it can flag it as like, hey, you're going to request 8 gigabytes of RAM or this much CPU. Is this something you really want? Similarly, using latest tag, like that's almost like a good general no-no for Kubernetes is using a latest tag.
Yeah. Either a tool like a linter or a good markdown file that an agent can use. They're already pretty good in, for example, calculating. If you give it a pod that was produced by Tecton, they are pretty good in telling you, like, this is the sum of resources that this pod is taking. In this, over here, you can make some improvements and optimizations. So with a little push and a bit more context, I think it can perform very well.
The common task runner image will help with this, because like one of the reasons that tasks that I've written have many, many steps is because I need to switch between, a build step, and then I need ORAS to do something, and then I need Mobster to do something, and then I need ORAS again. And so I'm bouncing in and out of those contexts in order to get the right tool. If they're all in the same image, scripting it is straightforward.
Yeah.
So I think the move to get inline scripts out of tasks in general, we should document that as a direction, alongside the one to get a common task runner image. The move to reduce the number of steps, we should get that documented too. Like the nice markdown file that somebody can follow. Yeah, let's get that in like the architecture repo as an ADR, something simple. It doesn't have to be contentious. Like we already agree on, I think.
Yeah, I will wait for the Gemini notes and give it to Cursor.
Yeah.
Put
Okay.
it in ADR.
Yeah. Thank you, Claude. Thank you, and thank you, Adam, for raising it. I think that's the end of the agenda. Let me check back just to make sure. Yeah, that's it. Next week, in a future week, it looks like we're going to have Hector's got a point on Kube Archive retroactive ADR, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Good call, good discussion. Cheers.
Thank you.